Good afternoon. This is Monday, August 29th, 2022. This is the Superintendent's Workshop. It is 4 p.m. and we are meeting in the Joanne Idlett Junior Teacher Education Center. I'm going to turn this workshop over to the Superintendent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And our first presentation is a look back at our district strategic plan. And as I begin this presentation, I'll remind our board that our strategic plan is 100% aligned to the superintendent's evaluation system. This was a unique initiative that we took on 2 years ago upon my arrival to ensure that we were evaluating what is important. And there's nothing more important than the district strategic plan. So no better way to align my evaluation to that of our district's strategic plan. I'll also remind the board when we created the strategic plan, we created it in the midst of a pandemic, and in its creation, we did not push back, we did not hold back, and we didn't dilute any of our expectations in the creation of this plan. There are many systems that took advantage of the pandemic and reduced or watered down their expectations. This strategic plan, the benchmarks that were created within the course of each of the years for a total of 5 years, the standard remained high, the standard aligned to everything that I declared upon entering the school system. So what I will do is go back, quickly review the plan. I've had the opportunity to meet with each and every single board member to review our outcomes of the course of the last year, to receive feedback. I will conclude my presentation for thanking the board for that feedback, but as a point of reference and to say it up front, this board holds a very high expectation in terms of what this public school system does for its children and the community in which it serves. So when you look at the very first slide, what you're going to see here is in 1819. Why are we comparing to 1819? That is the baseline of our district strategic plan. So it is a point of reference over the course of 5 years. When we conclude this plan, we want to be ranked in the top 10 in each of the areas in which we're holding ourselves accountable. So in 1819, which is also the last full year that we had, minus a pandemic or no impact from the pandemic. So it is a great baseline year. So in comparison to where we finished, what does ranking of 38 mean? That is all of the components that are used to determine the school grade, and you add up all of those numbers. That is the district's, that is the methodology used to create the district's grade. So there's no wavering of numbers or redoing things here. It is simply the exact same methodology used to determine what a district's school grade was. So in the 18-19 school year, we were 38 out of 67. Not to go backwards, but for those of you who are on the board, when I interviewed, I wondered why we were 38th out of 67th, because the short time that I was becoming familiar with Indian River County, that made no sense as to why we weren't significantly higher in state rankings. And the longer that I lived here and continue to live here, absolutely we should be in the top 10 in each of those specific categories. But let's talk about the growth within the very first, or the end of 2.5 years. So as you can see, we move from a state ranking of 38 to 22, which is a state ranking improvement of 16. Same environment, same conditions, but a significantly different outcome when you're looking at what this district and its employees did. That ranking, improving 16 state rankings, is the highest rate of improvement in the state of Florida for 67 districts. The only district that kept pace with us was Washington County, which I learned yesterday during a presentation at one of our local churches, where actually one of the members of the church went to school in Washington County, and she informed me that there are 6 schools in Washington County, so significantly different in terms of the scope of work and the size. So this is significant in terms of what we have leveraged through. It talks through, despite the obstacles and challenges with the high expectation that we've set, the district continued to thrive. And when I say thrive, I'm not claiming victory. I'm not saying 16. It may be the best in the state, and it is, but it's ultimately so much work yet to be done. When you look at surrounding counties, all of which very similar scenarios. Indian River County, same percent of points pre-pandemic with none of the pandemic impacts. 3 years, 2.5 years of impact from the pandemic, same exact percent. That is significant. What was that impact in Brevard? A reduction of a letter grade, a reduction of a letter grade in Martin, in Okeechobee, also a reduction of a letter grade. St. Lucie, hats off to you, congratulations, you were able to maintain the B. Now, looking at each of our plan, I do not have to review the components or structure of our district strategic plan with our board members because they ultimately live it on a daily basis. Academic success looks at a few key areas: overall student scoring level 3 and above in ELA math, as well as our early learning programs, improving that state ranking, as well as our high school acceleration programs. So when you look at those components, you'll see in early learning programs, we started at 1440 in our baseline year, moving 10 spots to 30, significant ELA student scoring 3 and above from 38 to 27, and a middle school acceleration point from 56, which is way down there because there's only 67 counties, to a ranking of 21. So those are some of the opportunities for improvement. We're going to talk through some of the strategies to continue to ensure that we hit our outcomes towards the end of this presentation. Equity, culture, and climate. As you know, this district is still in a desegregation order that has taken way too long to address. I will not go into the specifics regarding the volume of time and commitment that both my staff and myself have taken really to put our shoulder to this work, to partner with our community to ensure that every single student walks into our public school system regardless of the zip code in which they reside in this county, the town that they live in. But when they walk into our schools, it is a free and appropriate public education when students feel safe, comfortable, secure, and they can focus in on the quality instruction that's being provided. We have made this a priority in our school system, and we're continuing to see improvements. Still, yes, absolutely, board members, work to be done, but there are some signs that we are beginning to make significant progress, as evidenced by our performance gap in ELA, African American students and white students going from 45 to 37. Looking at our ELL language learners going from 22 to 18th. That is also the looking at the gap. Math for our economically disadvantaged students going from 45th to 16th. Least restrictive environments, which was 40, once again, significantly low, moving it to 20. That's really ensuring that we're putting students in the appropriate places. That is an adult behavior that we quickly addressed, and we're reaping the benefits for that. Communication and engagement, which is the third element of our district strategic plan. Once again, this is the opportunity to leverage, support, and communicate with our families regarding the work that's being done and really creating very authentic opportunities for our community to engage. So we have, in fact, increased the numbers in terms of opportunities for district activities and numbers, going from 32 to 65. Parents accessing our parent portal called Focus, going from 59% to 87%, which is significant, and then the number of workshops from 31 to 150. We are looking at creating opportunities in school sites now that the schools are completely open. We're functioning at what has been the most typical or normal situation since I have actually been here, really trying to maximize engagement, providing real authentic opportunities for parents to engage and be involved, whether they have 2 jobs or 3 jobs. We understand in problem solving with them. There are clearly defined opportunities to connect and engage those families with our students. Looking at talent development and support. This is really looking at how we're growing our work team. The biggest piece of our strategic plan really focuses in on the energy and focus around improving the quality of instruction. And our strategic plan has been extremely heavy in this specific area, really focusing in on the first 2.5 years about building capacity. Once you make that investment in an educator, that skill is there forever. So the skills that we have been developing over the course of the last 2 years will continue to have a compounded impact on the teachers, or I'm sorry, the students that will be served by these teachers each and every single year. As board members were briefed today, some and the rest of the board members will be briefed on Thursday. We're now continuing to look at our out-of-field waiver report, going from 10% in 1920, significantly higher than that in previous years, down to 8%. That is significant. That 2% is significant, especially when you consider the volume of new teachers that have been coming into public education over the course of the last several years. Referencing back to our desegregation order, moving from 9% to 12% in African American instructors is also a significant improvement. That number of 9 was stagnant for a number of years, wasn't moving, but a very specific plan created and implemented. We're beginning to see those numbers increase. Hispanic instructors, once again, slight increase from 5 to 7%. That is our fastest growing population in our community, so we need to continue to monitor that. Big piece of our meeting today is organizational and fiscal responsibility, and we've done some really great work. And to be very honest with you, some of the work that's being done in right-sizing the district around our priorities and spending dollars aligned to our priorities and having a long-term plan in place, just not a one-year plan, but a multiple-year plan that looks at indicators around student performance and pulls back on strategies and cost over time based on the capacity in which we're building. Part of that plan is really to look at grant funding. We've gone from $2 million to $3.2 million. As you know, we're going to be aggressive in that this year, continuing to increase that 3.2. It was an increase of 1.2 is significant, but we know we do not, as a school system, want to leave any dollars on the table. 100% compliance with material and fiscal audits, which is a major accomplishment. The Florida School Safety Assessment Tool, 100% compliance, and 753 indicators of the safety inspection, down to 538. Still work to do there, but when you're managing 22 campuses, we will continue to see decreases in that number. So looking forward, as I have already discussed with the board multiple times, regarding shifts and modifications to our district strategic plan. And not only are we kind of highlighting and talking through where we have come last year specifically, but over the course of the last 2.5 years, more importantly, where we are still need to go. So in looking at some of our annual targets, you have noticed, and we've had conversations about revising some of those targets to ensure that we are appropriately hitting the 2025 overall outcome. So what that means in some areas in which we did not realize the progress that we wanted to, we don't continue to not hold ourselves accountable. We've adjusted our targets over the course of the next 3 years to ensure we need to hit that focus in 2025. So as an example, in some areas in math, we didn't perform as we would want to, but we didn't go backwards and say, let's reduce our expectation because we didn't perform as we wanted to. Let's ultimately continue to improve, and we have to do better in math, and our goals that we set for ourselves 100% reflect that. Enhancements to our district strategic plan, looking at academic improvements, looking at processes and support, to professional development and coaching. So really looking at doing development in isolation last year, really understanding the roles and responsibilities of a principal, of an assistant principal, of an instructional coach, using those as examples. And once we have that deep understanding, which we believe that we do, really pulling the units or those specific job titles together to ensure the system has a deep understanding as to how those different job titles support one another in doing the work. So moving from an individual isolated approach for development, to a team approach, looking at the different roles and responsibilities to ensure that all of the systems to grow quality instruction around the classroom are in fact in place, and they're supporting one another in order to ensure that we're growing educators and supporting educators in the most effective and efficient way. And then really looking at shifts to program evaluation. And I'll use the example of alternative to suspension. We spoke about the high numbers of suspension that were in place prior to the pandemic. Those numbers were aggressively high, and students do not learn when they're not in classroom. And we have very, very high expectations as we have opened up this school year regarding how students will act while on school and what is expected in terms of behavior. And we're upholding those expectations. And we know if we're looking at the systems that surround and help students create those behaviors that lead to success versus simply punishing them, and being more efficient and effective at evaluating those systems and making real-time change or modifications to those programs to ensure when a student is in an alternative to suspension program or an indoor suspension program, it does provide them the opportunity to, A, yes, be held accountable for that behavior, absolutely, but at the same time, provided the support that is necessary to understand the behavior that led to the consequence in order to ensure we are going to maintain students in classrooms. So I will conclude by once again thanking the board, the conversations that we've had regarding the overall outcome of our district. This board continues to push. And this board has never taken their foot off the gas regarding the possibilities of what this school system can do. I can tell I am extremely proud of the work that this district has done, the work that our teachers, administrators, this district staff. It is 100% committed to students. It is an organization that moves at an extremely fast rate, but at the same time is really reflective on its practices and willing to learn from itself. And I am looking forward to continued success. We captured a great deal of success, and we have gotten a great deal of opportunities to go and share and celebrate the work across the state in the coming months. But ultimately, we think we're going to be able to attain the goals and targets that we've set in our plan for 2025. And with this district's board support, I know we'll be able to achieve that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, sir. Board members, any questions or comments? Okay, I saw Doc Jones first.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Congratulations moving from 38th to 16th. I think we're all very proud of that. Can you explain to the public, why did we increase so much in the middle school acceleration?
The state uses the denominator for that score of any student who is in 7th grade scores a level 3, 4, or 5 and passes the Algebra 1 exam in 8th grade. We were denying students the opportunity to participate in that accelerated course in 8th grade, even though they had a score of level 3. One of the first things that we did is to ensure if you had that predictor, the state's criteria to be in that Algebra 1 course, you were afforded the opportunity. So we increased that state ranking by providing access to all students to participate in that course and provide the additional support and development for our teachers. And we have proven to everyone, when provided the opportunity, when provided the access, the students will perform.
Okay. When we looked at district activities, I saw that we increased from 32 to 65. And I think it's great when we have activities for our parents. But one example that I saw last week at Rosewood I thought was just fabulous with the MCAN, going to the school and then having the parents come in right after drop-off. I attended a few of the meetings last year by Zoom or being there, and I think it's much more efficient and easier on parents if we do it that way. You know, coming to the district office and having 6 to 10 parents, you know, that's great, but I think where the parents want to be are at the school. So I know I've got that date for the next one, I think is VBE, but I thought that was a good beginning of what we need to do to bring it to our parents. And the last thing, for program evaluation, when we look at alternative to suspension on campuses and then our programs off campus, have we had a percentage rate of those who don't go back there, or how is that working?
Through the chair, the initial data is positive. So students who do participate in that program, I don't know if Ms. Dampier has it off the top of her head, I don't want to put her on the spot. So that data was in fact good, but the opportunities to improve it still are there. The volume of students that are still being exposed to those programs, we want to begin to reduce that. So there are still significant opportunities to improve that number over the course of the next year or two.
And as a former principal, I would want the students off campus for a while, but I didn't want them on the street. So whether they be in the program at school or at another site, and given the work, I think that's to their benefit. Thank you.
Dr. Schiff?
Yeah, that would happen as soon as I put a nut in my mouth.
Yeah, following up on Dr. Jones's comments about alternatives to suspension, I appreciate the need to do this to increase the number of bodies in seats and in schools rather than in or out of school suspension. In strengthening those programs so that kids don't recidivate, so that they are in seats more, can you talk a little bit about what are some of those initiatives or ways by which those programs will be strengthened?
Through the chair, and to be very honest with you, it's very specific to school site. So looking at who the instructor is, the level of connectivity in terms of the assignments, the kind of work that's being done, the quality of support that's being provided to the students, as well as the follow-up work and support when the student returns to class. So we would be a little naive to think you go there for the 1, 2, or 3 days, have that support, and to think that just automatically fixes the behavior that may have been in place for a number of years. So really connecting that ongoing support once the student returns. So it's just not a dosage that is one time. It is a being consistent over the course of the school year to follow up with the student, stronger communications with the teacher. Some of the things that we're doing is ensuring that the students, while in the program, understand the impact of their behaviors on others, and then taking the necessary steps to communicate and follow up with those that may have been impacted by those specific behaviors. So really kind of healing some feelings that may have been hurt, whether it be with other adults or whether it be with other students, rather than just having the consequence without having the opportunity to resolve a possible conflict, will just lead to more conflict in the future. So being more aggressive about, someone is receiving a consequence for a behavior, but sometimes it's just not that student we need to connect with to grow or mend a relationship that ensures that they are in fact in class each and every single day.
Yeah, thank you. That's almost exactly how I would have hoped you would have answered. Because what I hear you saying is there's a focus on building relationships. One of the complaints that we hear from teachers is that students are disciplined or receive some consequence, but then there's no follow-up, so that the teachers aren't aware what happened, nor do they have the ability to either mend the relationship with that student or create agreements moving forward that enhance the relationships between the teachers and the students and whomever else might have been involved, because often it's not just that individual student. So thank you for that. And again, agree that the movement from 38th to 22nd, not 16th, it was the 22nd.
Was it? Okay.
22nd.
Up 16, up 16.
And the note about putting that in context of other districts in Florida is noteworthy, and I agree with you and always have that we should be in at least the top 10, if not the top 5. So I'm happy to hear that we're continuing that and look forward to seeing how we're going to get in the top 10.
We will.
I agree, we will. I'll be gone, but the district will. Thanks, that's it.
Ms. Rosario?
I just lost my internet connection, so what I really wanted to look for, I can't find it right now, but I'll do my best. So I have a question about, what I was looking for was tonight's meeting agenda. This isn't coming to us for a vote.
No, this is just the opportunity to get the initial round of feedback for the board, and then we'll have follow-up conversations.
Okay.
And then the goal is to approve the strategic plan at our next convening,
Okay, perfect.
but not tonight, you're correct.
Okay, because we just received this on Friday.
Right.
Okay. So I have a few suggestions. The first one in academic success, what I don't see is an attempt or a goal to increase CTE or vocational programs or students in attendance in those programs. I think that's something that we have consistently talked about as a board, and it would be nice to see that added, if we could add that to the academic success, obviously for obvious reasons, for students to have the option of having school choice, and then also for students to be able to, if they wanted to use the dual enrollment program and come out of the traditional classroom to do dual enrollment, then you have less of an impact of discipline issues than you would otherwise.
What page are you on?
The targets, I'm on page 7.
Okay.
I'm just looking at the overall targets in terms of the bullets on the top.
So if you
Targets
look
for
at,
2025.
so if you look at the high school acceleration performance, that component is derived from 2 very specific metrics. A, students enrolled in college AP dual enrollment courses, as well as students participating in industry certification exams. So we're capturing that criteria and looking at that ultimate outcome. So as you see, that number is still pending because it's kind of lagged from the state. So even with the attendance impacts we had last year because of the pandemic, we still anticipate seeing growth there. But I think what Ms. Rosario was saying, and I don't disagree with it, is maybe kind of highlighting maybe the areas of growth within each of those 2 different indicators.
I mean, if you wanted to have a specific number, of increase, I don't know if that's what you're looking for. I was just looking for, in that bullet, to say something along the last bullet, increase the district average in accelerated performance. Wait, is this program, or are you looking at performance, specific?
The performance of the program.
The performance of the program? Then maybe including CTE vocational programs or something to that effect. Or if you wanted to add a specific number, I'm open to either one of those. I'd like us to be able to have it in the strategic plan that this is a goal of ours moving forward. Something else that I thought was interesting here is that you included ELA and math, but you didn't include the science and the social studies. Now, the overall science achievement is the same as the ELA overall achievement. So science achievement is 53, ELA is 53. Just wondering why you didn't also include science in this.
So as we design the plan, and I will be very honest with you, Ms. Rosario, I get that question a lot, specifically from science teachers. So maybe adding some kind of an addendum or a specific, I'm not going to look at you right now, Ms. Barenborg.
I'm wondering the same thing. Go ahead.
Well, the driver was ELA and math, and to be very honest with you, in the design of this, upon my arrival, we wanted to really put literacy at the forefront of the conversation. Literacy is in every core content. If you're able to improve that specific number, you can improve all other numbers. One of the kind of side effects to that wasn't that we were not holding ourselves accountable, because the school grade is made of both of those, science and civics and U.S. history, and the level of attention that we pay to those, especially this year, because learning gains will not be a component of the school grade. So I do agree, when you see a final version, some way we need to capture that growth, because in a lot of ways, I think it has been significant in the past, but I think this year we're really going to do an outstanding job.
Well, and then in that same breath, and this wasn't a part of my notes, but in that same breath, I'm sure social studies teachers are going to say, well, what about us?
It happens.
So how about a look at improving the scores on the core courses? ELA, math, science, social studies, not excluding everything else, but having a preference to look at those core courses and improving there with regard to academic success.
And I think that's why we do this. There's a way of capturing it without anyone ever accusing us that we're trying to change our focus areas 2 years into the plan. So as we always do, we'll problem solve, we'll get your input, and we'll be able to create something.
Well, we're not changing the plan.
Well, you know what I'm saying.
You just,
I
the
don't-
target is an annual target of where we are getting, where we're going, and in part, that's what you use for your evaluation. So basically, we're talking about your evaluation next year.
Okay, all right, I'm gonna pay more attention. No, I'm kidding.
No, I mean, these targets have changed throughout the last 2 years anyway. And for the better, because every year there is movement. Every year it's fluid, right? Where we were last year, 2 years ago was not where we were last year, and where we're moving this year is not where we were last year. So I would imagine it would be appropriate for the targets to change.
Target's correct. I just want to be completely transparent on what we're assessing. So
Yeah, that
if
was
we
my
were to
question.
add or modify something, I would want to say that the board has made a decision. And there have been areas where, I gotta be honest with you, in using communication as an example, there may be opportunities to add some stuff to communication because we're only 3 or 4 percentage points off a target that we set in 2 years. There's some opportunities to shift in some of the compliance issues and organizational fiscal responsibilities because we've created, in some cases, the organizational behavior. And I don't want to sell the organization short, saying we have that system or that adult behavior in place. Let me just continue to, because you're right, Ms. Rosario, this is my evaluation, and some of the criterias we will hit every time for the next 2 years because the behavior of the organization has been created. So as we come back, it's working with the team to say, all right, well, what's next? If we're 100% compliance, how do we make sure that we get, all of the doorstops completely out of the school system, or just a higher criteria?
Okay, so the next area that I wanted to talk about was equity, culture, and climate. The first 2 bullets, I think it's the wording that I'm definitely not okay with. So we did not have this wording in the last year's, I'm getting my years mixed up, in last year's targets. So last year's targets, you looked at, the first bullet in this area was out-of-school suspensions. And then underneath that, it said African-American white disparities, African-American to white disparities in classroom removals. And you looked at risk ratio there. In this one, you wrote, maintain a recidivism rate for alternatives to out-of-school suspension, and then eliminate disparities in classroom removals of all racial, ethnic subgroups of students. Again, looking at risk ratios. I have a problem, serious problem with
Tell me.
recidivism, with the word recidivism and with the disparities, right? So the way that it's written, recidivism, and coming from a household that was understands law enforcement. When you use the word recidivism, you're actually referring predominantly to the criminal justice system, to juvenile detention centers, or to jails, right? When criminals are put in jail, what they look to do is to reduce recidivism, meaning, the reoccurrence of certain actions, the reoccurrence of certain criminal acts. I would like to not use that word with regard to our students. If we could change it and simply state something along the lines of reduce misbehaviors from reoccurring, very simply put. Reduce the number of student behaviors by event occurrence. Because actually in the Power BI data, it states suspensions by event or suspensions by student. So if we can actually capture here any of those options, right? So the first one I said was reduce misbehaviors from reoccurring, or reduce the number of student behaviors by event or by occurrence. Either one of those, I'm okay. I just don't want to use the word recidivism.
I understand what you're saying, but that is the intent. I think Dr. Schiff was just mentioning, sending the same student for the same consequence without being able to reduce the behavior we've got to focus in on the things that we're doing to evaluate them, to improve those things, to ensure when we provide an intervention for a child or a consequence for a child that ultimately it is in fact reducing the occurrence of the behavior that doesn't lead to success. But we're
I
saying
agree.
the same thing. You're
Can we
stuck on
reword
the.
it? Can we reword
We got a
it?
few
I mean,
we have a few good wordsmiths.
We don't always have, I see even Molly, even Ms. Shattuck is like shaking her head like, yeah. You know, because that's the word that's used in legal terms, and I don't want to see I don't want in our document to have the same word that's used in the legal system, and then have, you know, someone throw a finger, not saying this is going to happen, but throw a finger and say, you see, you know, there's that pipeline, or, you know, this is what the purpose is, and, you know, so I would just rather find another way of wording it. Which brings me to the second bullet, eliminate disparities in classroom removals of all racial ethnic subgroups. When I read this, because we know disparities are just differences, right? Great differences between subgroups. You know, in the hospital, in the care system, the healthcare system, you often see the disparities occur by socioeconomic status or by geography or language or gender or any number of subgroups or any number of those mentioned. But we here, what it looks like and what it appears to be is that we are identifying or trying to eliminate behaviors based on race. And that should not be the case. We should be eliminating behaviors, misbehaviors, based on the actual misbehavior, not based on race. When we look at behavior based on race, or when we're trying to eliminate these disparities based on the racial differences, you know, we're actually segregating more than we are bringing together. And I don't want us to capture that in our target. I would like us to be able to, again, if we could wordsmith it, not look at it, we should look at behavior, because what we're really trying to do is not target specific subgroups, we're targeting the misbehaviors, right? Aren't we targeting the bullies? Aren't we targeting the ones that are cutting class? Aren't we targeting those, not target, I don't want to say target. Aren't we trying to identify the action of bullying, the action of cutting, the action of, you know, violence or fighting or misbehaviors, disrespect in the classroom? So we're looking at changing the behaviors rather than identifying and separating those by subgroup. And that, I think, it's a big difference. There's a big difference there. So I'd like for us to take a look at that. If you can change it somehow, fix it, I don't know how you.
And I understand and value what you're saying. The Florida Department of Education, as you know, upon my arrival, this district was just coming off a discipline plan placed on us by the state for that same criteria in which you're looking. So the overrepresentation of African American males that were suspended. So we're being evaluated one specific way. So yes, 100%.
Are we being evaluated right now by that? So where is it?
Yes.
Well, they continue to monitor and look at those numbers. There is no punishments for us currently right now. But I understand what you're saying is, yes, 100%. We're going to look at the behavior of a child, and we need to ensure that every child, regardless of the color of their skin, that behavior yields the same consequence. And students were being identified that the writing of the referral is based 100% solely on the behavior. So it's really kind of being comprehensive and looking at it in its totality to ensure, you know, everyone is treated the exact same way.
Well, I'd like you to take a look at that. You know, I've spoken with a lot of teachers, many of whom have said, you know, if there's a misbehavior in the classroom, what they are told, not all, many, what they are told is, don't write up a particular student because they're African American. That's what this bullet is about, right? Reducing that number and not writing them up because they are African American, when indeed the behavior may have been, or Hispanic or something else, where indeed the behavior may have warranted a proper referral. If the behavior warrants a proper referral and it needs to be addressed, then we need to look at it based on that, not based on, and that's coming from someone who,
No, I've heard the same. And the reality or the response is, the expectation is you don't make a determination based on, you make a determination on writing a referral based on the behavior. And the appropriate support is provided to the child. It's not, we're not trying to reduce a number. If that was a reality, the system as a whole would be going in the absolute, complete wrong direction.
but that's what this is saying. This is actually saying eliminate disparities in classroom removals of all racial, ethnic subgroups of students, so the risk ratio of the subgroups in comparison is equal to 1. I mean, you're still eliminating based on racial subgroups. That's what this is.
Yeah, maybe I could lend a little insight to this. I know, Mrs. Berenborg, you haven't gone yet, and I really want to respond to this because I think there's a misinterpretation going on here.
Are you calling?
Hold on. She's pointing this out. You brought up what the state said before, correct? Mm-hmm. And you have not brought up what the DSEG order says. Could you enlighten us what the DSEG order says on this?
All right, well, I'll get that in a second, yes.
Because I believe
Decrease.
this wordage,
Decrease right here.
Should be that.
Oh, go ahead,
Decrease
Dr.
African American white disparities in classroom removals by 6.64 risk ratio points. That's part of the African American Achievement Plan.
okay, is that from the DSEG order?
The DSEG order also, so the joint plan in the section that is related to student achievement indicates that we need to eliminate gaps, which would be the disparities, in things like academic achievement, discipline, et cetera. So it is found. I can get the exact language for you if you'd like.
Okay, and then one other thing, if you could clear up. This doesn't necessarily mean not do the suspension, it means trying to eliminate it by prevention also, correct?
100%.
Okay.
Okay, well, I think that's good language, prevention, right? If we could look at maybe aligning it better with the desegregation order so that it doesn't appear as if we're doing something completely isolated from what we're already charged with needing to accomplish. And we have time, right? So we can continue to have this conversation, correct? Okay, I'll move on if you don't mind. Thank you for hearing me out. Thank you for that clarity, Mrs. Berenborg. The other thing that I had a question, let me come down here. Is the academic, this is the last part in this one section, there is an academic achievement gap, decrease the academic achievement gap. It is the third bullet in the equity, culture, and climate section. Why did you put that there and not in the academic success?
Achievement gaps. The achievement gaps.
Decrease the achievement gap between all subgroups. Why put it here with equity and not under academic success?
That's just where we naturally felt it fit, because in equity, culture, and climate, that would be the key indicator in which you'd be looking at to say, they always say, what's the gap? So evaluating the reduction of the gap would be a pretty good way of looking at that specific area.
Okay, I just don't see it with equity, culture, and climate. You know, I see equity, culture, and climate as,
Behavioral.
well, the culture and climate part, I see it as a result of whatever the results are of the culture and climate surveys that went out. Right, to me, that's culture and climate. What did the students say? What did the teacher say? What did the administrator say? What did the parents say about the culture and climate? And then from there, we draw what our targets should be with regard to culture. Like, to me, that's culture and climate. The feel of the district, the feel of the school, the feel of, belonging. this celebration of cultures in school, you know, that sort of thing. That's what I think of. I don't think of academic achievement gap.
Got it.
Okay, I'll stop there, Madam Chair.
Okay. Mr. Barefoot, do you have any comments or questions?
First of all, the overall were terrific. But as always, relative performance and absolute performance are two different things. And my concern has always been particularly around math. And we've had a lot of conversations about this. I know that there's some initiatives underway, but as far as I'm concerned, while maybe not as important as reading, but it's right up there in the two skills that young people ultimately be successful. And any initiative be taken to make sure that the kids, the time they get to the fourth grade, or at least half or close to grade, is really going on through middle school and to even AP courses in high school. So of all of the positives in all the areas, the one area that if I had all the votes and cared about nothing else but be focused on math and doing everything I can, those kids better prepare going forward. That very good year.
Okay, thank you. We're catching like every couple of words are not coming through for some reason.
Well, I
He's
know.
talking about math, yeah. So I just wanted to say, as far as the science goes, if we're looking at a lot of STEM schools and that's being our focus, that to me should be one of our focuses on this. If we're looking at STEM as a, you know, a lot of our schools have chosen that as a choice program. And I also know that on this, I haven't had the time to go through it like everyone else. I was out of town, so I know that I'll be able to ask any questions I want in my meeting with you. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. I do understand, though, why the equity, culture, and climate, why what Mr. Rosario is pointing out is there, because I believe that achievement gap is what is central to the DSEG order information, and that would fit under there, correct?
I believe so.
Okay, all right.
All right, thank you, each and every single one of you. Our next item, and we do have guests in the room.
I'm sorry.
Wait, can we come back to something on the disparity and disproportionality? I want to clarify here that when we're having a conversation about the behavior, of course it's true that all students should be treated for the same for the behavior. The problem is they're not. And that's why we calculate rates of disproportionality and disparity. It's not just Indian River County. If you look across the state, if you look across the country, and there's data on this that has been ongoing for the last 10 to 12 years. What happens is that different kids are written up for different behaviors under the same title. So what's considered, for example, teacher disrespect is written up differently for different subgroups. It's not it doesn't show up in the actual write-up. The idea that you shouldn't suspend certain kids for certain behaviors isn't the point. The point is that we have to look more closely at the behaviors and who's being caught in which nets. And that's what this is designed to catch. It's not designed to catch certain kids over others. It's designed to make sure that how discipline is occurring is meted out equally across subgroups. That's why this is significant in the DSEG order, it's significant in the joint plan, and it's significant in our data. And I think that's what we have to keep sight of. It's not, do we want to stop bullying? Of course we do. It's that what's considered bullying for some subgroups is different than what's considered bullying for other subgroups. And it's not intentional, and it's not conscious. I've sat in rooms with hundreds and hundreds of teachers and administrators who are quite sure this isn't happening in their classrooms and in their schools until you look at the data. That's why this is significant and important. That's why it's an issue in the African American Achievement Plan at the state level and in the DSEG order. And I want us to be really clear about that.
Absolutely.
Hold on one second. I'm going to say a comment about this because having been a principal at a F school, turnaround school with a lot of discipline problems, one thing I noticed right away was when you grow up in a different culture and you don't understand what's acceptable and not acceptable from another culture, how you handle it. Let me just give you one example of a child who won't look a teacher in the eye when the teacher's talking to them. Their culture believes that they shouldn't look an adult in the eye, they should look down. And yet the teacher that was upset says, you need to look me in the eye, that's rude. So there's a cultural difference.
Yes.
That's why I'm such a big Kids at Hope person, because they teach that cultural changes and understanding cultural biases.
Yes.
So I think that's something I wanted to see it. We're doing it, right? Okay, all right. So that's why I think that training is important, because once a teacher realizes, oh, that's what the child's culture teaches them, then it's not I'm going to take this personally. It's okay, I have to deal with it a different way. The child still's wrong, but I need to make sure that they understand why they were
Well,
wrong.
the
Not
child
wrong
being-
about looking them in the eye, wrong
Okay.
about whatever the behavior was
The
that they were
behavior
talking
may
to
have
them
been, but the
about. Yeah,
response or
exactly.
is considered disrespect or defiance or inappropriate
talking about.
does vary by culture, and you're right. And that's where the write-up matters, because it is subject to interpretation and can be subjective, and that's what we're trying to get beyond.
Okay, Dr. Jones?
I do agree that eliminating disparities in the classroom is under equity, culture, and climate. And as much as I have studied the DSEG plan, joint plan, the DSEG plan from the 60s, 90s, and so forth, I think it's right there. And Ms. Berenborg, what you said is so very important. My mentor was Dr. A. Ronald Hudson. And what he taught me that I didn't know when I first came to Vero Beach was absolutely a lifesaver for me as a teacher, an administrator, a district person, and everything else. I think it's very, very important that we understand that and continue to give training to our staff members. One thing I wanted to say, obviously this will come before us with some changes maybe, and then we'll decide what we like. But when we look at, I'm switching a little bit here, the progress monitoring, and Dr. Moore, we already started the first testing the first or second week of school, the progress monitoring.
Yes, ma'am, we're well underway.
And we talk about, science would like to have this, social studies, and all of the subjects really want to know. But what are they actually testing, and what kind of information will we get for our parents? Will they have an English, science, social studies, math on every progress monitoring, or what will that look like?
Progress monitoring will be specific to the accountability areas, so K through 10 ELA, K through 8 in math.
Okay.
The EOCs remain as they were in place, although new standards, not necessarily progress monitoring based on that specific system, but we do provide updates for those students, just not in civics, because that's the 7th grade assessment,
right.
but in other, 6th and 7th grade, 6th and 8th grade history courses. So we do provide that, but that's not the information that is being provided from the state.
Okay, just as an update for parents, I'm sure this is new to all of us, so, and without
state,
gains,
too.
without gains, I'm going, whoa, well, how's that gonna look? Okay, I just wanted to say that about equity, culture, and climate. I think that's a good fit right there as far as the disparities in classroom removals.
All right. Thank you. And our next item, items B and C, will be covered by Mr. Fagan.
Thank you, Dr. Moore, through the chair, to the board members. Today we're going to talk about the tax anticipation note. Sitting behind me are two fine, outstanding individuals. Mr. John Ford, he's Vice President for Ford and Associates, who has been our financial advisor probably for well over 10 years. The other good-looking gentleman next to him is Ritesh Patel, an attorney. He is our bond counsel. He's been with Neighbors, Gibbons, and Nickerson probably for 10 years as well. They represent us in all financial transactions such as this. I also want to thank Mr. Wells Fargo. They're the gentlemen who gave us the lowest bid for our TAN, so acknowledgement to them. A little brief history. Going back about 14 years to 2009, the district issued 9 TANs over that 14-year period. The last time the district issued a TAN was in 2019 in the amount of $15 million. This TAN will be in the amount of $17 million and will be repaid on December 12th, 2022. Interest rate on this TAN is 2.49%. It's based on an RFP process. Approximate interest amount is $119,000. Closing costs are approximately $24,000 for a total cost of $144,000. This was a TAN, tax anticipation note. There are 2 methods to issue a TAN. One is a public offering, which you issue a created offering. You go out to the public and sell it on the open market. or you can go through an RFP process, which you send out a solicitation, banks respond in. We chose the RFP process for simplicity and also for the short term at which we wanted the loan. 4 banks responded: Huntington, PNC, Wells Fargo, and Zions. Of course, Wells Fargo was the lowest bidder. You may ask, why do we need a TAN, Ron? Well, the TAN is required because of the projected cash flow is approximately a deficit of $17 million, beginning in the month of September, going through the month of October. Also, beginning this year, our beginning cash in June was $3 million less than the prior year. So I'm starting off in the hole, and the projection for next year based on prior year expenditures shows us at $17 million. I also do another analysis where I looked at the actual daily cash balances held in the bank for from last year through November for the last 2 years. I do this to actually look at the true cash in the bank account, not necessarily what's on the ledger. The projections basically show a deficit of getting down to probably less than $15 million of cash. That's really too low of a number because my projections are not that good. And so if there's a $5 or $10 million swing one way, it's good, but if it's a swing negative, then I'm going to have an emergency meeting and you're going to have to approve a TAN then. So I figured it'd be better to be safe than sorry. Also, the expenditures are up a little bit from the prior year, and also remember that we get most of our funding through local funding, not state funding. This year, our local funding is going to be 68%. Prior year was 64%. So all those factors added together, a TAN is really required for this year to make sure that we have enough cash, we do not go overdraft at the bank, and that all vendors are paid on time. Any questions?
Board members, questions? Yes, Dr.
Yeah,
Schiff.
just a quick, I know we've had these conversations in private, but for the benefit of the public. How common is it for districts to go out for TANs, for example, compared to other districts in the state? And I know that it is sometimes different for larger and smaller differences because of tax revenue. Could you explain that a little bit?
I'm going to have to turn around and ask my financial advisor because he can probably tell me immediately right now how many districts are issuing a TAN, but I will probably say out of the 67 districts, you probably have about 30 that issue a TAN on a regular basis.
Is there a podium I should go to?
Perfect.
Stand it all. I'm not sure exactly how many issued a TAN this year or last. In the past, it's been somewhere between usually about 10 or 20 a year. Smaller districts tend to try to squeak by, even if they have a lower deficit in their general fund. Some of the larger districts that do it each and every year as a habit include Dade, Broward, Palm Beach, Pinellas, Lee. Flagler does it from time to time, Manatee, Monroe, St. Lucie. So there's quite a few, and that's very typical because it's more linked to the funding split between local and state taxes than anything else.
Right, so my understanding is that in districts like this one, where much of the local funding comes from property taxes, and those taxes don't go up to and then return back to the state for us. I'm not sure if I'm getting this exactly right. This is not my area of expertise. But it's based on how the money goes up and when it comes back down that has us have that small window of a gap when we need a TAN to ensure that we can make payroll and other expenses.
That's exactly right. Your expenditures are roughly level through the year. You pay salaries every month. Your revenues are not level through the year. Your property taxes come in between Thanksgiving and the end of January. So for the first several months of the fiscal year, you're actually drawing down on whatever fund balance was reported in your annual financial statements. And that gives people like Mr. Fagan here a lot of heartburn.
Right.
So that's what the TAN will be.
But then, so it is tied to the property taxes when they go back, how they're distributed, because our property taxes don't come back to us proportionate to what goes up because they're spread across districts, right? So property-rich districts help support property-poor districts. No? I'm getting that wrong?
No.
I was just going to say, as you know, as a homeowner, your property tax bill comes at the end of October, beginning of November. You can pay your property taxes in November, December, January, February, or March. Most people pay their property taxes in November or December, and you get a discount for paying it early. But as a school district whose fiscal year starts July 1st, you are drawing money down until the majority of your revenues come in late November, all of December, early January. And it doesn't go to the state. It comes to you directly from the tax collector in Indian River County. But it's just a function of how taxes are billed and when they generally come in.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Jones.
Just one question, Mr. Fagan, and thank you for always answering my questions. individually. What's our general fund balance now percentage?
Through the chair, through the board, your budgeted ending fund balance for 22-23 is 5%, which is what the board has, and you ended last year with approximately 13%.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Fagan, at our last budget meeting, going for a tan was not part of the discussion. How did we go from there then to now?
Through the chair, projections are an ongoing item that you look at periodically. When I looked at June, it was one of those things, as was stated, might be able to squeak by. Once we dived in a little bit deeper, it's not a risk I want to take. So I changed my mind and said, no, I'm not going to subject the district to that potential risk.
So what usually in the past, you may have said it and I may have missed it, but usually in the past, sometimes in the past, the tax collector will forward some monies to us in advance, so that would prevent us from going for a tan?
Through the chair, the property tax will give us about $2 million in early November as a little bit of an advance. Your big money is about $90 million, which comes toward the end of November. But that's not enough to stop you from getting a tan. It helps, and that helps us squeak, but it's not enough to avoid a potential deficit.
And we haven't gone for a tan in 2 years, is that correct?
Since 2019.
Okay, well, so more. I trust your decision-making, because you have done really, really great work with our finances, leveling it all out since you've been here. I'm a little disappointed because I would hope that we could continue that incredible streak of not needing to go for a tan. We've done it successfully in the last few years. And I wish there was some way that we didn't need to do it now. But I trust your advice. Something that you mentioned in what you were just preparing for us, you said you'd rather get it approved now in case you need it. Is there a chance that we may not need it? If we approve it now, is there a...
Through the chair, no, ma'am.
No.
Once it's approved tonight, cash will be probably transferred tomorrow.
Okay, and then what is the timeline for paying it off?
We'll pay it back on December 12th,
Okay, so it's just a few months.
just to get us through that bad part of November. Then we should be okay for the rest of the year.
What am I remembering, something about, going for, and it might have been, I'm not even sure if it was with you, it might have been before you, going for a tan or going for some loan and then investing it or something. What was that about?
That was in 2019 when I arrived. We issued a TAN and we didn't pay it back, I believe, until April or maybe May. It's where we borrow the money, but then you can invest that money and, of course, earn interest on it because you don't need it. And the interest rates are a little bit higher. And if that yield curve is positive where you can potentially earn some of that money back, you can get to a point to where your TAN cost you nothing or only cost you a little bit because you will earn interest on that money that you don't need anymore.
Did we earn anything?
We came close to breaking even, but we still had to pay a little bit because you never can control the market.
Okay. We're not doing that now, correct?
This is
It
a
will
straight
not-
loan.
I've got you on speaker. We're not going to take any chances,
No, ma'am.
right?
Through the chair, no, ma'am. We pay
Okay.
it back on December 12th.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Barefoot?
No question, no
Okay.
comment.
Okay. You know how I feel about this. I am not happy with the fact that we are a property-rich county and we help support other counties. That's great. But then our county, it costs us more money to send our money up there and then get our money back. So in other words, how much money is it that we will effectively, I hate to say the word lose, but lose in this?
The cost of the TAN would be approximately $144,000 with interest and all cost.
So that's the price of, I'm sorry, but I put it in the price of people, an assistant principal?
Through the chair, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so we're losing an employee because of going out for these TANs. Nothing personal, guys, I appreciate what you're doing for us, but I would like to have us seriously meet with the other, I think it's 14 districts that are always in this position where we put our money up there and we don't get as much money back. And talk to our legislators about how we can help get the revenues leveled throughout the year. I think that's the term that you used, leveled throughout the year. And I don't know how that can be done, but I think the fact that it's costing us an employee every time. Now, when I first did this, I think it cost us an aide or a teacher, and now we're up to an assistant principal. So I just imagine it's going to continue to be several people in the future. So I think that the only way we're going to be able to avoid this is maybe talking to our legislatures about helping us with this.
To the chair, I did reach out to have a DOE, and many, many years ago, they had a thing called a forward advance that was part of either law or in the general appropriations, where districts who were in this situation could get an early advance on their state money to help with that cash flow problem. But that went away.
That went away. Bring it back. We need to bring it back. All right. I understand that if we don't vote for this, then there's a chance that our employees won't be getting a paycheck in October. Is that correct?
To the chair. No, ma'am, they'll get paid.
Okay.
Bank will just be overdrawn.
The bank will be overdrawn. We do not want to be in that position. Okay, thank you, sir. Anyone else?
How much is in our fund balance right now?
Well, keep in mind, fund balance is not cash. Fund balance approximately, you ended last year with approximately $20 million.
And how much cash do we have now?
Currently, right now, ballpark, I want to say $30 million.
And we would need 90 million.
I'm sorry, no, you'll get $90 million in your latter part of November. Your first big check from the property appraiser's office is approximately $90 million.
So how much would we need? And that's the night.
Oh, to get through the crunch is about $17 million is what the projections are showing that we would be deficit.
So we would be short 17 million. Currently, we have 20 million.
Correct.
And even though we have the cash, what you're saying is that would leave us with 3 million, which is way too short for us to leave an entire district with just a $3 million cash flow.
Okay, well, let me
Is
see
that
if I
right?
explain it. Close, yes, ma'am, but there's two ways I look at it. Financial advisor trained me very well. I'm going to look at the ledger. What is the actual cash going to do based on beginning balances, and then what did we spend last year, and what does that look like based on revenue? Then I go look at an actual hard cash to see what it's looked like over the last couple of years. One number shows a negative 17 million. The other number shows me basically maybe at 10 or 12 million as a cash balance. A 10 or 12 million dollar cash balance based on my hypothesis is too close for comfort. There's too many variables that can sway that number. So between those two methods, a TAN is needed. Based upon the analysis of this, 17 million is the max.
So, I'm sorry. I know that we talked about this, just refresh my memory again, because this is, what is the difference between the state of our district last year this time and the state of our district this year needing to go for the TAN? What happened?
Best way to describe it is your cash flows are a fluctuating item. They constantly change throughout the year. Case in point, we owe or will need to pay the charter schools approximately $4 million for their share of ESSER money. That's an additional $4 million requirement that I have in the next 30 days, that I did not have last year. So your condition didn't change, just your timing of your cash flows in and out changed.
But ESSER money is something completely different.
Still got to pay it out first before I can get paid back. So I have to have that cash in the bank first. I get paid back after I pay. They don't give us the money up front.
Okay. So that's one example.
That's one example. And then I ended the year with $3 million less to begin with, so I'm already don't have the cash flow that I had in the prior year.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Fagan. Oh, you're still at the floor, I'm sorry. See?
To the chair, next item is an item we discussed was regarding when we went out and solicited dental, vision, and flexible spending accounts with various vendors in order to help save the employees some dollars. Based upon this proposal, we have some new vendors we're going to be using, and it's a 3-year agreement, approximately save $592,000. This is what we call the cafeteria plans that are under the benefit program, vision, dental, et cetera.
Board members, anybody? We're good?
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item will be, I'm going to set up the next couple items. Ms. Becerra will present item D. Mr. Bass will present items E and F.
Through the chair, good afternoon, members. I have 2 items that I'll be bringing forward. Board members, you've all been briefed during the individual board briefings of these 2 items. The first one is the Professional Development Catalog. This is a document that's updated annually and submitted to the Department of Education. This plan has been revised to reflect any legislative changes and has been edited for some clarification. And the purpose of this is it includes component numbers that identify the type of in-service credits that are awarded. The second item is the Student Progression Plan. This is also an annual plan that is brought before the board and uploaded to the DOE. The state requires us to maintain a student progression plan that outlines policies and procedures related to promotion and retention. This plan has also been revised to reflect any legislative changes and has been edited for clarification. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Board members?
I'm just pulling it up now. Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
That's okay. Dr. Schiff?
Yeah, just to clarify, I know we had this conversation in our briefing, but just to clarify for anybody who's watching, this professional development are the professional development standards that are required by the state to be aligned to curriculum standards. They are not professional development that we are providing or are voluntary or are outside of anything that has been directed by the state, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Rosario?
Thank you.
problem.
I'm just kind of scanning through to see the changes that we talked about privately.
In the student progression plan,
Yes, ma'am.
that was on page, I believe it was page 12.
So I'm just scanning it now. So I
But-
want to thank you for making some of those changes on there.
Thank you.
And then with regard to the virtual program, that was all,
Yes, that was really just cleaning the language up. That was a good catch on that. And to your point about the home education component, it was also just adding clarity to what was already there around
Okay.
the annual evaluation.
thank you.
No
And
problem.
then in the document that's on board docs, as I pull it up, there are these little yellow Post-its on there.
Oh, okay, I'll go back and look at that.
I don't know, I mean, they're not, you can't click on it, so
Okay.
just, you can, I see on page 18. Might just be something to clean up, so.
Okay.
Okay. Dr. Jones?
Just looking at professional development, the first one, Ms. Becerra,
Yes.
when we look at all the requirements by the state and then the schools, so when you look at elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, working on their professional development, how are you guiding them according to the standards and the achievement levels? How do you work with the schools to make sure what they're doing is what's going to be most effective for their students?
Well, that's based on a needs assessment, and that is driven by data.
Okay, so do you have any idea what they're focusing on this year, any of the elementary, middle, or high school?
So a little precursor to an October board meeting will be the SIP plans. They are
Okay.
currently in their phase 1 of their SIP process, and all of those components that they're working on are embedded in their action plans for their school improvement planning process.
Okay, and when we look at the other one, if a board member is recommending a change, could you note it so we look at it and we just don't
Yes.
see, you look through these things and you highlight what you have questions on, but if
Okay.
there's any corrections, then I can go back and see what it did say compared to what it says now and whether I vote on it.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I do have a follow-up one,
Go ahead.
if you want me to go last, that's fine.
Mr. Barefoot, anything?
No, thanks.
Okay, Ms. Rosario?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify for any parents who are listening and for the community, the student, and of course, Ms. Becerra, correct me if I say anything out of place. The student progression plan is really just a document that helps anyone in the community, mostly teachers and parents and administrators. It shows them the progression of students from one grade to the next. How do you get your
Correct.
grading? How do you move from, third grade to fourth grade? How do you graduate? How do you collect your credits on a transcript, that sort of thing?
Yes, that is correct.
And then last year, the quarter grades, was there a change either last year or the year before in terms of a student receiving a 0? I think someone mentioned, I see it here that a 59 to a 0 or a 0 to 59 is an F now. That may not have been the case last year. Is that
The
correct?
change in this document is, in previous years, a D and an F equaled a D for the semester grade. When you run those calculations, a D and an F equals an F, so we reflected that in the grade chart.
I think that's fantastic. I've heard a lot of teachers bring that up. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it up again. A few of them actually told me, oh, I just heard that they changed the grading. So, and they're very happy about that because a 0 is a 0 is a 0. You don't hand in something and then, you don't not hand in something and then get a D. So I think that we're gonna get some support there on many of these changes. And I think some parents might actually, be supportive of that, that it accurately reflects what the student has actually done correctly. So thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you.
All right, I have got item CF, which is the guaranteed maximum price for the Sebastian River Middle School classroom wing addition. I briefed you all. This is in the capital budget, $6.9 million. This is for phase 2 of this project. Replace the 7 portables that were removed there with 14 classrooms and 2 science labs. All right, next item is...
Oh, wait, Mrs. Rosario.
Oh,
has
sorry.
her hand up.
This is a perfect example for someone not understanding the process. Even as and even still, I have questions, being here on the board, not quite 4 years yet, but I still wonder. And so if this would be a good opportunity to clarify it for the community who are listening, who just heard us say we don't have the cash flow or we don't have enough money, we may need to go for a TAN, or we are going to go for a TAN, and then here we are spending $6.9 million on revisions to these portable, to the classroom, to the structure of one of our schools. Can you help clarify this for the community and distinguish between what the difference is?
Through the chair, the way that it's always been very simplified to me is categories, categorical funding. So you've got different line items that you can spend different things on. So obviously, you have your operational money, which is going to pay for salaries in the operation of the district. But then you have this category, which is capital dollars. And you can't spend capital on teacher salaries. You can't spend capital on, different operational costs. So we get our money through tax revenue for capital that is set, and we projected this out because we know what we're going to get each year. So as that money rolls in, we're going ahead and working these through. So that's the simplest way is different categoricals is why you can spend on one thing and can't spend on the other.
And this is already included in our 5-year capital plan.
Yes, ma'am. It's been in the 5-year plan.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So the next item is the resolution is going to be presented to you tonight to be a member of the Small School District Council Consortia. This is a group that is school districts. It's available to school districts that are 20,000 students and less. Even though Indian River School District is much bigger than the school district I came from, it is still a small school district. We would be joining 38 other school districts in the state of like-minded school districts that share a lot of the same concerns, problems, and views on educating our students. It gives us a great voice legislatively. The organization started in 1982, and right now the 38 members that are in it covers 14 Senate districts and 20 House districts. So strength in numbers, we would be one of the larger districts in this group. They have done many, many positive things over the years. The SSDCC, I served as one of the executive officers for 6 years while I was in my other district and have worked closely with them since 2003. Very, very advantageous for us to be a member.
Anyone?
I seem to be the only one.
Okay,
Just-
Mrs. Rosario?
Oh, go
Anybody
ahead.
else you want to get in? Someone
No,
else
go
first?
ahead.
I'm excited about this. This differs by a lot, actually, from the Florida School Boards Association. Some might question why we would be a member of both. I think the Florida School Boards Association, since I've been a board member, has really provided some pretty good training for board members. A lot of what I've learned regarding how to be a board member has come from the training from FSBA, and it's really been very beneficial. On the other side of that coin is the fact that not every one of the Florida School Boards Association legislative platform aligns with ours. And I think that's where this membership would come into play, because they have such like-minded challenges. And I think that that's really going to benefit us. It's not a lot of money in comparison. I do wonder, though, do they give any training, or is it just legislative and other kinds of support?
Through the chair, they don't really give any training, but it's that legislative voice. And to your point, what makes this organization different from FSBA is you're the superintendent, and you designate one board member. Those are the people who drive the priorities of the organization. So we have got a huge voice in determining what we want to move forward with.
In their platform or in ours?
In the SSDCC. So they have a platform, and then we have our own platform, which a lot of times the small school districts, your district platform will mirror or take in some of the same things that SSDCC is fighting for also.
It did. I looked at theirs. It's not too far off. I mean, one of the concerns that they have as a challenge, and they added it to their platform, their legislative platform, was about transportation. Mm-hmm. At some point, we also included that in ours. So I think, when does that start, though? When does the selection of the board member, one board member, and the superintendent begin?
As soon as you all approve it, then we would then, at the next board meeting, identify who would serve.
Are these positions virtual positions, or do we go in person?
They will have a meeting at the November FSBA FADS joint conference. They have a little breakout session. They also have a breakfast that we go to that Dr. Schiff and I attended, I think, last year. And they provided, he gives out a packet of information and tells where they're at with everything. So they have breakout sessions there, and then also a lot of it is through email correspondence. And if they do something, if they need to have a virtual meeting, they do it virtually, just because you're talking about 38 districts that are spread from Escambia all the way down to South Florida to, Hendry County. So driving to a spot is not feasible.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Berenberg, just one question. Mr. Bass, in all your years of working with this organization, what has been the strongest legislative impact that they have pushed, I guess you could say? For me, it was back when you had a digital classroom dollars. And originally, legislatively, that money was only going to go out to districts based on your FTE. So if you have a school district with, 10,000 students, your money was going to be significantly less than what you would get if you had, 300,000 students. What SSDCC did in this and the additional Safe Schools dollars was to establish that each district would get a baseline amount that was the same, and then above and beyond would be based on FTE. For example, the classroom digital plan started out at $500,000 a year. So for our district and other smaller districts, that's a huge chunk of money that would help us for technology needs. Safe Schools the same way, and then they added on top based on your FTE. So that was two things that were very strong that they did. And then also one of the things, and over the time, and I don't know what the years of this is, but
SSDCC has advocated for $1.4 billion in school construction for small school districts through the Special Facility Project. Special Facilities Project probably would not be an avenue for us to go because you give up your capital dollars for 3 years, 1.5 mils of them, but for smaller school districts than us, they get that money back from the state because the larger school districts agree to give that PICO dollars to build schools. So very strong in that. And then just the little small things like I know the school superintendents, the elected versus appointed. You know, a couple of years ago, the state tried to say, okay, everybody's going to be appointed. And SSDCC fought to say, hey, no, we want to keep, you know, the smaller districts. You know, I think Pasco County is the largest elected district in the state. Want to keep those superintendents elected. And being on that side of it at that time, that was very important to me.
Yes.
So they've done lots of things. I could go on and on.
So strength in numbers.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Schiff?
Yeah, I will say, the breakfast you alluded to that we went to was one of the more informative events of these types of coalitions that I've gone to, and I passed everybody the info. He handed out a whole packet of information that I made sure you all had access to from that as well. My suggestion would be, I'm completely in favor of it, my suggestion to the board would be that moving forward, this will affect you all more than it will affect me. But I'm not sure that there's value in being part of the Central Florida School Board Coalition as well as this one.
Yeah, that's
And if we're going to be part of a coalition, and this is the one that better suits our needs, I'd suggest everybody consider dropping out of the Central Florida School Board Coalition, which I'm not sure we receive much benefit from, frankly. I've gone to some of their online meetings and some of their breakfasts, but I found the small school board, I can't say that acronym as well as you, that one, was actually much more productive. I gained much more from it. Another one that I also find is good, I'm going to forget the name of it, the one that goes around the south.
Sarah's.
It'll come to me.
Right, I know what it is, but that one is also.
The Greater School Board Consortium.
Greater, is that what it is? I'm not
I
sure.
think it
But
is.
that one I've also had some experience with that has been really informative at their meetings, passed out really good information, represents some significant districts. So if we were going to be choosing between, I would say that Central Florida School Board Coalition is the one that is of least value to us, and that we should drop out of that one, join this one, and perhaps even consider the other one.
Sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
Do we pay for the Central School Boards Coalition? Is there a fee for that one?
Yeah, it's a fee for all of these.
It's a membership fee.
Yes, ma'am. I'm not aware how much we pay for that one or if it auto-renews. I'm not sure.
We can provide that information to the board.
$200 per year for that one.
Oh, yeah, then
It's not big money.
it's not a lot of money, but maybe we should consider, I would accept that recommendation from Dr. Schiff to look into, I mean, I don't know how many people actually attend it. I know I get the invitations, but I have not been able to attend.
I actually have.
I've attended some.
For the Central
online.
Florida ones. And there have been some things on there that I found very informative. So I haven't attended the small one as many times, although I did have conversation with Chris Doolin up in Tallahassee when I was up there. So it was nice to be able to have a face with a name that represented us when we were in Tallahassee to talk to him about some of our concerns, especially one that I brought up earlier about the tan. So it is nice to maybe stay with some of these, especially when you're talking about the big ones. If we're going to talk to other districts about getting together with our legislators about trying to avoid TANs in the future, that might be something to have conversations with different groups with. If it's only $200 for each of them, it might be worth it for us.
I think that's accurate, but.
I don't know. If you could find out how much they were.
They are paid in 2 years.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bass. And the following two items, so the last two items will actually be Ms. Dampier.
Thank you. Through the chair and school board members, I have 2 items on the agenda tonight. The first one is the 2024 School Health Services Plan. This biannual plan outlines the provisions and responsibilities to provide mandated health services. And we've gone over, well, I have gone over this plan with each board member and tried to answer as many questions as I could pertaining to this particular item. Do you have any questions?
Board members?
Yeah, I don't have, yes.
Okay. Mr. Barefoot, do you have any questions while she's searching?
She got a.
Okay. I'm sorry, I forgot to ask you on the last one.
May I? I don't know if I have a question. I think I need to well, yes, I do. During our one-on-one sessions, what was explained to me was that this plan was really originally supposed to be created by the health department, not the school district. And that they have typically not done a good job with it, didn't know all of our programs or everything that we provided for students statutorily and by policy, and that it then became kind of like our thing to put together so that we are sure that we're submitting the right document. Is that all accurate?
In the past, we have done, created this plan in collaboration with the Department of Health. Mrs. Burney, we thank her for putting this together and working with the different committees with SHAC, but there have been some turnover with the Department of Health, so that has led to some of the plan with Mrs. Burney having a knowledge to be able to answer some of the questions and to be able to put the information in reference to the state mandated goals and expectations.
So one question that I didn't have when we had our one-on-one about the dental program. So if you look at page 7 of this document, number 6 says preventative dental program. So what the form looks like, there is a template from, and I'm just saying this out loud in case others aren't aware. There's a template, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the Department of Health has created. The first column is put in this template, and we cannot edit that first column. The second column also is kind of entered in by the Department of Health. We cannot enter or edit those columns. I see a shaking head. I listened, I heard you.
That is correct. The first column is statute and/or rule references that is outlined and already completed by the DOE. And then the second section, which is the program standard/requirement, is already listed. The areas that we are responsible for inputting is the local agency who's responsible for implementing this statute, and then the strategy and activity. We work in collaboration with the Department of Health. It is you'll see throughout that it is a collaboration as far as who's implementing the statute.
So, I have concerns with this, and doesn't seem to be anything that we can actually have an immediate impact on, because if everything is driven by statute, then we have no choice but to follow the law and to do what is being asked of us to do. But like the preventative dental program, the local implementation here from the district is that the coordinator of health services collaborates with local dentists and school staff to provide dental health education opportunities. How does that work? You know, a kid has a cavity, and where is the parent in all of that?
Well, as you know, we outlined in the parental acknowledgement form, it had the screening for dental screening, where parents could consent to opt in or opt out. If a parent consents to opt in, of course, the student will receive that dental screening. But then if there are additional services that are required, then, which would be like a dental sealant, et cetera, they still need parent permission for that. They can't go any further, besides just the screening.
So essentially a parent, and I'm stating the obvious, but I want to be able to say it publicly, essentially a parent has the ultimate say to opt in or opt their child out of any of these screenings, whether it's dental, vision, scoliosis. There is another
Growth.
one here for.
Growth,
What was it?
vision, it's,
Vision, hearing. I forgot hearing. Vision, hearing, growth and development, scoliosis, you know, and I know that there are many children in need of these screenings, but overall, I just wish that we weren't looked upon to be the medical facility, which we are not. We should be able to refer. But again, it's not, and something that it seems is in our control, which is very frustrating. As an elected official, when we make decisions here, we make decisions on education, right, with regard to policy and procedure. And there are many policies here that align with these statutes, but it just seems 25 pages is pretty shocking.
and with those screenings, there is a copy, the parents have a copy there's a link that they can go to and see the questions that are on the screening, so they have access to that before they make the decision whether or not they want to opt in or opt out. So we made that available via Focus, as well as if there was a hard copy, parents didn't have access to that. There are hard
Okay.
copies available.
We should really be having these conversations when we're in public meeting, because there are some parents that may benefit from hearing some of this stuff. Last question, Mrs. Dampier. On page 23, there is a, let me see, 23, Part 2, it's a comprehensive school health services rather than supplant basic school health services is the title. 39F states that we are supposed to provide or coordinate health education classes to reduce the incidence of substance abuse or misuse, suicide attempts, and other high-risk behaviors. The implementation on our end is to provide a 5-hour mental health training for grades 6 through 12. Now, what I didn't ask when we were one-on-one, is this the new rule that was just put in place or just approved by the DOE in this last legislative session? There was a new mental health.
No, we've always, well, since the Stoneman Douglas and we received funding for mental health, there was a 5-hour mandated, mental health course, a set of courses that the students have to take 6 through 12, and we've been doing that.
There was a new rule in one of the new bills that was signed, and it has to deal with a mandated 5-hour mental health course. It might be redundant, it might be the same thing. I just want to make sure that it's not 5 plus the new 5, and then it's really 10. But if it's the same 5-hour, course or whatever it is required for students, who determines that, this rule? Where does that training come from?
Well, of course, we are required to report. That's one of the required reporting. We have A through, I think it's O. And on there, there is a requirement for the 5-hour mental health services. And we do provide that via online component, as well as we have our SAC, which is a substance awareness team that comes in, and they provide that at the middle school level. And they've been doing that since we've been required to implement this in our school district.
So now that we are in a new season of ensuring true curriculum transparency, especially, aligning with the Parents' Bill of Rights and Education, and the other bills that were signed, how are we going to ensure these online components are going to be transparent to parents? I think I don't know if you all have had those conversations. It just occurred to me now that we haven't had it. So what is the district going to do to make this transparent?
We were just audited, and we were using another program, and now we're using a different program. Our mental health specialist, as well as Mrs. Bass and myself, are vetting the curriculum and reviewing the curriculum to make sure it is aligned to all the requirements that are outlined that we must cover for the mental health, to make sure that it is appropriate for our students. As a matter of fact, we're having a meeting with Dr. Moore this week.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Bear?
Yes.
Ms. Dampier, is Oslo Middle still our only full-service school? We used to have more.
Yes, that is. We will be moving forward with trying to acknowledge one of our elementary schools who meet the requirement.
Okay.
But we, of course, wanted to get the plan approved first, and there is an elementary school that meets the requirement.
Just a question, when you look at Part 2, Comprehensive School Health Services, for example, 39I, collaborate with interagency initiatives to prevent and reduce teen pregnancy. You have the local agency responsible, but no strategy and activities. Why don't we have that there? And also for reducing involvement in sexual activity, why aren't we helping our students there? We have the local agencies, but the local implementation strategy.
Where are we? I'm sorry.
39 was in
39F?
39I and 39J. And 39H. That whole first three areas, NA. Why are those NA when most of the other ones do have local implementation strategy and activities? In fact,
We do have some of those areas that are covered in another section pertaining to teen pregnancy and all of that. That's and parenting program. Can't call it off right away. Mrs. Burney, do you know?
I can't hear you, hon. Sorry.
Ms. Burney? She's.
It's on. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry. We work in collaboration with the Department of Health as far as referrals for our teen pregnancies, because they do have a teen pregnancy program. So that's addressed in a prior portion of the plan. I was just also made aware that we do have an additional, we had a person reach higher within the district that was covering a portion of our teen pregnancies whenever she was made aware of that. And so I was just made aware that we do have a person that's picking up the slack there. So we are covered. We just don't have that portion addressed in that section. So we probably need to add that.
Thank you.
Is that all? The only other thing I was going to point out is number 37. It says parental consent for healthcare services, and I know that's in statute for the parental rights. And I appreciate on the right, it says written parental consent and physician's orders are to be obtained prior to administration of medications and/or medical procedures. So is that all under focus where the parents are filling all that out?
As far as, I don't think that's part, isn't that written? That wasn't a part of our, we do have a process where the parents fill out the forms, but they have to bring in the doctor's note. That's all still paper and pencil, am I correct?
Medication consent is a separate consent where they are having to follow the procedures that we have, the paperwork outlined, and they have to sign the specific medication consent form before we are allowed to administer per statute. And that was in place prior to House Bill 1557.
And do we still have the same procedure where we have one person and then a substitute that can administer the medication and certain medications, not others?
Per statute, we have 2 medication-trained backups in every school, a minimum of. We've actually done a really good job of increasing that number across our district over the past few years.
Okay, and we do have some medications that they even can't administer, a parent has to come in and do.
There is an occasion, yes.
Okay.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
The final, you have one more, Pam?
I have one more.
I have
The last item is H, and that's on the agenda tonight. We have a review of Neola Policies Volume 23, Number 1, and the special update. Each cabinet member has had the opportunity to meet with board members to review these policies and answer questions during board briefings. This item is on the agenda tonight to request approval to set the public hearing, which will be on 10/24. Each cabinet member is available to answer any questions that pertains to those specific policies, if you have questions.
Just for public hearing.
I do.
Okay, Mrs. Rosario.
Boy, I'm full of them today, right? Okay, so the one with the 2520. We talked about this, maybe me get it out, sorry. 2520 is the selection and adoption of instructional materials. It's one of the items that has been a topic of discussion, and for some even argument with regard to what is considered non-adopted instructional material, non-state adopted instructional material. We keep going back and forth on this, because many believe, as is included in statute, that library books are non-adopted instructional materials. They are not adopted by the board. They are purchased. And in this policy here, what we do not have is clarity on that. Now, we've gone back and forth about this, us and the superintendent and your team. One of the things, board members, that we discussed was that this section might also include, and I'll tell you why this is a concern for me in just a second, that this section could be referring to the curriculum. Let's say, for example, this year we're going to adopt social studies and the civics. So if social studies and civics is this year, if we do not adopt one that is recommended by the state, that one would be considered non-state adopted instructional material. So if social studies A is not recommended, but we want to go with them, then we would have to follow this process, which has a specific committee and specific procedures that have to be followed to adopt that curriculum that is not state adopted, that is not a state adopted instructional material. But what is not included here, and I went back to the new one that will be passed tonight, that we'll go through tonight, is the clear understanding of where is the process for library books. That's what we're missing somewhere, like a clear understanding of the process for adopting library books, library and media center instructional materials. That's what's missing in all of this. So even though this seems well and fine and good, what are we going to do about that? That's the part that we need clarity on. So at some point, we're going to have to kind of figure that out, because we now have as of tonight, we will have a process for challenging the materials, but we won't have a process for actually select, vet, purchase,
I saw it in.
library, media center. So you might see it in one or two places, but there isn't a process for it. If we were to adopt this here and say, yes, library books are non-state adopted instructional materials, which aligns with statute, then this process here would have to be for the vetting of the library books or media center materials. And I'm not so sure you want this to be that process. Make sense?
No, I think we spoke about it a number of times, as I have with a number of board members. As you know, we are in the process of literally watching state board rule meetings where they're creating those specific, or creating the guidance / state board rules that we will be able to put in place. So if it's the will of the board to create something that's more specific than what's currently in policy, because you're right, Ms. Rosario, it's kind of referenced throughout, but to be extremely explicit in the creation of what exactly those procedures are. My recommendation, if directed by the board to do so, is let that rulemaking happen. As communicated with the board, we think we may have information to go on as early as October, which is before what we were initially saying. We can begin the process of saying this is proposed policy that the board can debate, and we can come to a place as to what that specific procedure policy would be.
But then what happens with current, where schools are just going to wait until October?
I think we need to be, fiscally responsible, and in terms of selecting and purchasing, there's a number of guidance that we would need in order to determine what is or is not appropriate. And we can't unspend the money that we would spend, or select something, or possibly allow, very similar to what has happened before, when you buy or select materials and something is in there that you're not 100% aware of. So you need to, be fully understand what in fact age appropriate is based on the information from the state. And then we locally here at our level create the system or process in which we will collectively follow across the system in order to go through that process.
Dr. Moore, I'm sorry, Ms. Berenborg.
Yes.
When you look at the information, I agree on, I don't like waiting, but making sure we do it right and making sure that we don't spend money that we don't have. But when you look at library material, not everything in that library is instructional material. There are thousands of books that we have in our high schools and middle schools and elementary school that are not used as instructional material. So I think we have to be very, very careful on the delineation there. But as far as what we can do for our district, our media centers, our parents, our students, make sure we get it right. And especially with our finances, we don't want to do things ahead of time unless we are sure.
Okay, so I know you have more questions, but since you brought this one up, I have a couple questions. So if we could stick to this one, and then we'll bring up the next one. If you look at that same exact policy, on page 2, in the first part of the green, the very first sentence, it says, instructional materials recommended by each reviewer shall be to the satisfaction of each reviewer, accurate, objective, and so on. So does that mean one reviewer can object for all? Or is there anything in here where it means like they take a vote and it's the majority of the vote? Because the way it's worded right here, it looks like one person can say, yeah, I don't believe that works. And so that one person can throw out material because of that.
I don't see it like that.
That's a lot of power for one person. That's what I'm asking.
Dr. Shafty?
So in reading that, the first line has singular reviewer, but then the second line has reviewer shall consider. So it would be the interpretation of those two lines together.
I'm going to tell you that's going to cause a problem. I think that needs to be cleaned up. I think it needs to be very clear as to when somebody is going to be on an evaluation committee, that they know what the rules are and what they're responsible to do. I don't want to put anybody in a predicament where, you know, like a 12-member jury, where you have got one person that's, you know, holding out and it's causing issues for everybody else. It needs to be clear as to what we're going to choose to do. I'm not done yet.
You want us to pull this one and?
Okay, so if we could look at that.
Let us look, because
Okay.
I'm having a hard time understanding why.
In other words, what it says to me, what it says is to the satisfaction of each reviewer. So if one reviewer says, I'm not satisfied, I don't think this book should be here, or I really think this book should be here, you've got the power of one person. You see what I'm saying? That's the way I read it.
That's not how I read it, but let us look.
Okay, look at it again. And then the next part on the next page, page 3. Oh, never mind, that's okay, I got that one figured out. The last one, page 4. I'm going to read that part where it says purchase of instructional materials right underneath it. It says, following adoption by the board, requisitions shall be issued to purchase current instructional materials from the state-adopted instructional materials list, so that each student in kindergarten through grade 12 will have a major tool of instruction in core courses of the subject areas of mathematics, language arts, science, social studies, reading, and literature. In other words, this tells me that those need to be on the state adopted list in our policy. That's the one I brought up to you in our meeting.
Policy 2520?
It's on 2520, page 4, underneath where it says purchase of instructional materials.
You want to respond or not?
I'm fine with that, but I just want to make sure that you understand that that's what we're voting on. Okay. Those were my biggest concerns with that one. Mrs. Rosario, did you want to bring up something else?
Yeah, what you mentioned here on page 2, I just wanted to clarify that the title for this section is referring specifically to the textbooks.
Right.
So that would be for textbook
Reviewer.
adoption process.
Right.
The ELA, the math, this year coming would be the social studies textbook adoption process.
Right, so if the committee all likes one particular social studies book, but the way I read it, one person can say, I don't like it.
Yeah.
So because of that one person saying, I don't like it, they can't adopt it.
Well,
We could do that for every single one, so they
Yeah.
could go around and round and round for months.
well, I don't disagree with you. I think I agree with you on that. It does need to be cleaned up to be specific, but as you keep moving down, as you keep reading 1, 2, and 3, it is very clear on what each reviewer shall do.
Right, but I think that one
So
statement needs to be
it should not be
cleared
based
up.
on their personal opinion, it should be based on what is required of them in here. Would this be something that we would have to just pull for tonight to review again and bring it back to us? Because tonight starts in there doesn't seem to be anything on here that is pressing.
Through the chair, not pressing, but let us look quickly, and if we have to pull it tonight, and you're right, in a little bit of time, we will, but it may be a simple word or two that we add to bring a level of clarity.
Yeah,
Okay.
I
And
just
my-
think it needs a word or two,
Yeah.
that's all.
I don't disagree. I did want to just add with regard to library books and media center books. The issue with those books and the media center items is that any teacher not always does, any teacher can require a student to use or to pull a book or to pull a material or supplemental, activity, whatever it is, at any given point in time. And if that is the case, then it is considered a classroom instructional item. But we don't always know that, right? Because we don't know what teachers would require of their students in advance. So in that case, that's why statute has it written that all items in the library / media centers would be considered instructional material. And I'll show you in statute 1006.28, number 1, halfway down, it reads, with regard to district school board, and then it has a subtitle, Courses of Study Adoption. Number 1 reads, and I'll only stay here. Number 1, each district school board is responsible for the content of all instructional materials and any other materials used in the classroom made available in the school library. Number 1. Or included on a reading list, whether adopted or purchased from the state-adopted instructional materials list, adopted and purchased through a district instructional materials program, or otherwise purchased or made available. So essentially, it really doesn't matter. Library books and media center materials, whether supplemental or used directly in the classroom, it really doesn't matter whether they're adopted or not, they're still considered instructional materials. Each district school board shall maintain on its website a current list of instructional materials by grade level purchased by the district, and then it moves into a different category, different definition there. So just want to make that clear. Library books and media center materials are still considered instructional materials. That's it. They're just not adopted instructional materials.
Dr. Moore, question on that. When I look at that, When it says each district school board is responsible for the content and other materials used in a classroom made available in a school library. So does that denote the thousands of books or just those that the teachers use for instruction? For example, when I taught and we had novels, we kept them in the library, for example. Great Expectations, a separate piece. So are we talking about every single library book or those made available for instruction?
Everything is made available.
No, not every book in the library is available for instruction.
Thank you. Through the chair, if I may respond. The way that reads, they are saying the board's responsible for the content of even library books, and I think that that's clear because library book challenges will ultimately go to the board for final say. So that's how you're responsible for what's in them.
Very good.
So will we have to go back and review every library book that we have?
Yep,
Thousands of library books?
yep.
Thank you. If they're challenged, that is when they may come to the board through our challenge procedures for the board to make a final decision on whether or not they meet our criteria and the legal requirements.
So what's the cost of this? If we have to go through every single book in every single library, in every school, what's the cost to the district of that? I know you don't know the answer right now, but that's thousands and thousands of hours, right? That's not random. That's a cost to the district. That's a cost that has to come out of somewhere. So before if there is some dispute about this, I think we need a clear and strong legal opinion before moving forward. I don't think this is something that we necessarily decide, as meetings are starting right now on something of this significance.
Agreed.
So I'd suggest that we table this conversation for now. We move on at a further date where we can get our questions to the superintendent in advance and get those answered so we can have them in a future workshop.
I agree. Okay. I do have two short little things that I want to state about the policies. Copy of school safety and security is policy 8405, school safety and security. I'm going to look exactly at, because of something that happened, I'm going to refer to page 4 of 8 at the top where it says recommendations of the school safety specialist. The last line in that paragraph says, the school safety and security plan is, however, confidential and is not subject to review or release as a public record. Could we make sure that this policy is handed out then at our safety meeting? So that every person in that safety meeting knows that this is a confidential plan?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wait, say that again, I'm sorry, where are you?
I'm on page 4
Yeah.
of 8, recommendations of the school safety specialist, last line.
Oh,
The school safety and security plan is, however, confidential and is not subject to review or release as a public record.
okay.
Okay? And then on policy 9150, school visitors, I don't know if this is new or if it's just been the practice of the district in the past that when we visit, I know a lot of times if I walk with the superintendent, they say you don't need to sign in. When I go on my own, I sign in and I sign out, or unless, of course, it's after school. I notice that legislators can do the same thing now because of the new legislation, but I would encourage all board members to make sure that you sign in and you sign out when you go on school campuses. Okay? No, we haven't in the past.
Oh.
That has not been the norm in the past. But I just wanted to point out that it is in the policy. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Those are the only ones I had.
And that concludes workshop.
Okay, it is 6:03, and we now have an interestingly full room in the last 2 minutes. We are going to take a break. Board members, how long do you want? 5 minutes? 5 minutes? Okay. So we will resume at 6:08.